Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. with Glenn Sutherland. This week, my repeat guest is Grant Burwash. Grant, do you want to tell me a little bit about your story, how you got into this, and then we'll just go from there?
Sure. Yeah, I'm similar to a Canadian that's actually moved down to the US. So I've kind of had experience on both sides of the border, similar to probably a lot of people that listen to your podcast. So I first got into real estate actually pretty young. My parents owned a couple rental properties, and then I started investing in real estate myself kind of in my early 20s, did some land deals. And then when I moved down to Houston, moved into a little bit more of mezz debt around developments, had a rental property for a little bit. And as I started to move around a little bit more, then kind of got out of that and moved more into the technology space. So I've been with FrontLobby for about the past 5 years, doing everything kind of within the company from a sales, support, any sort of standpoint as we've kind of grown this business from the ground up. So kind of excited to share a little bit with your members how we can help, and swap some real estate stories today would be fun.
So yeah, you brought up FrontLobby. What is it? What is this? How can it help these people? How can it help the real estate investors in Canada? How can it help real estate investors in the US? And does it even work in both? Maybe before you get to that, what is FrontLobby?
Yeah. So FrontLobby is a SaaS platform that allows housing providers of any size to report rental data to the credit bureaus. So we're unique in our offerings because whether you have 1 unit or 1,000 units, you can report. And we also allow you to report both on-time payments as well as debts. So what that means is you can help your great tenants build their credit, especially in tight markets. It's a pretty nice attraction tool that you can provide to someone to say, hey, this is something that I offer. By renting through me, you can actually build your credit so you can buy a house or get better interest rates. And conversely, it helps you kind of weed individuals out by saying, you know what, if you miss your payment, it's going to have an immediate impact. And where we've started to see that really take hold is on places like Ontario or New York, where there's pretty favorable tenancy laws, where it can take a long time to get an eviction. You often have kind of these drawn out judicial processes through the boards. And so this is kind of a way that you can actually start to put some near immediate leverage on those individuals who choose not to pay their rent, and just to make sure that you're top of mind when rent comes due.
Yeah. So that just honestly, well, first off, we'll go back to my first question. You just mentioned New York, you mentioned Ontario. So you can do this everywhere? Is there any states, provinces this doesn't work?
No, we operate across Canada and across the US. So you can report, there's 2 components to it. When you're reporting on-time payments, consent is required in each jurisdiction. So the tenant can choose whether they want to use it to build their credit. But when you're talking about reporting debts, consent is not required in any jurisdiction. So that's a nice added benefit for you as a housing provider to know when you're reporting debts, you don't have to worry around consent. We operate all across Canada and the US. So if you have properties in both countries or just one, you can use us.
Okay. And then, so say, I guess there's always perks, right? So where my mind's going is if I'm going to use like a rent to own sort of situation, a contract for deed, a lease option, something like that, it could be a great way for the tenant to build their credit, in order to, so whenever they want to buy this property off of you,
Yeah,
they can actually qualify for it. So that makes a lot of sense for me. But when you're going to report debts and the other side of this, if things aren't going well, when do you start? Do you start this whenever the tenant says, they're like, hey, I'm late. Can we set up some sort of payment plan? Or do you start this right from day one? Like, what do you usually see people doing for this, and what is the correct way?
Well, as you can imagine, we see the full gamut. We see people that's like, my tenant moved out 2 years ago. They owe me some money. How can you help? Which we can talk about in a second. Or in a situation where, like you were, my tenant's 10 days late. I don't know if I'm going to get paid. What do I do?
Yeah.
The reality is, whatever your situation, if there's a debt that's owed, you can start reporting. So whether they live in your properties or whether they have already moved out, you can do that. Best practices, though, is to use it for all of your leases. And the reason being is, like, one, it helps attract those individuals to you. It's kind of part of your whole screening process. So we have clauses you can put in your leases as well as your applications. So you can have proactive conversation with a potential tenant before they move in saying, this is something that I do. Then for all your current tenants, it's just, you can use things like our monthly rental reminders, late payment notices, kind of nudges through our platform just to make sure that rent is top of mind for those individuals
Yeah.
because it significantly reduces the likelihood of late payments or any sort of delinquencies. If you do happen to be in a situation like you mentioned where you have someone that isn't paying rent, if they're a month or two late, simply what you do is you'd update the balance to include unpaid rent and utilities into the platform, and you can start reporting that debt basically the next month.
Okay. So think about this. In my head, I'm thinking about this two different ways. If you're
Yeah.
self-managing or if you're using a property manager. So if you're doing a property manager, for instance, the property manager is going to have to basically be, lining this up, making the basically reporting it to you, right? So like how does that look? So that the tenant is, so you say you set this up right from the very start. The tenants, being reported to every month. The property manager then just has to log in and say when they did collect the rent, like the date, and so that they know if it's late or not. Or how does that look? Or does it even integrate into any of the software? Or is it like
Yeah.
a manual thing that they have to go do every month?
Yeah, you touched on a bunch of good things there. So first off, either property managers or landlords can use the platform, as you said. So it's usually whoever is collecting the rent.
Yeah.
The system does integrate with some larger property management software tools like Yardi, or a vast majority of our users are smaller independent housing providers. And so we've made the system pretty easy to use. So what that would be is, Glenn, I'd enter you as a tenant into the system. Really, the information we need is first name, last name, a date of birth, email address, and then your basic rental details. So the property address, the rent amount, and then the system is going to assume every single month that you pay rent. So the only thing that you would have to do as managing the properties within the system is, if you don't pay rent, I would log in and update the balance to show that, okay, it's February 13th today. Glenn hasn't paid rent. I'm going to put in the $2,000 that he owes me. And then if you pay that off throughout the month, you would simply update the balance. If not, that outstanding balance of $2,000 that you owe is going to get reported to the credit bureaus the next month. If you paid on time this month, I don't have to do anything. The system's going to assume you're still living in the property, and it'll give you the benefit of paying your rent. So you don't have to go through and actually make those adjustments on an ongoing basis when someone's paying.
And then they should be doing that at least every month, right? If there was a late or like a non-payment, right? They sometime in, we're recording this in February. So sometime in February, they should be like ideally before the end of February. Or if they got into, say, March, could they go and say, hey, they didn't pay rent in February, or is it too late? I have more free content. So if you're interested, I created a PDF guide and a video to go along with the PDF guide to complement it. And what the guide is all about is the 5 most common mistakes that Canadians make when investing in the United States. So if you're interested in this free guide, go to CanadianInvestingInTheUSA.com/mistakes. And let's go back to the podcast. And it's free.
Yeah, if they're in the system, like, you can kind of retroactively go back. There's maybe 2 parts to that, but what I'll say is, like, if you go in, and usually best practices is people will go in somewhere between the 3rd and the 10th.
Yeah.
And they'll see, okay, what checks clear, what payments have I got? And then they'll update any outstanding balances. And then as payments come through, they'll just update those within the system. So they usually give a couple days. It's usually logging in once or twice a month if there is a debt, and then you go from there. If, let's say, you paid your February rent in early March, I can go back and update that balance to show as paid if I don't want that to be reported as a debt. Right. It's what we end up report is the information that's available at the end of the month. So if it's a $0 balance, that's positive. If there's a debt, then of course that would get reported. So the other component to your question that I want to make sure to address is, if you are signing up and I haven't paid you for 3 months, you would just simply sign up and put that as the total outstanding debt as of today. So whether I'm a current tenant or whether I'm a former tenant, you'd simply input the outstanding rent and utilities that are outlined in the lease. No judgments required, no consent is required, and you can start reporting on that balance.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And so then where's my mind going? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was going to ask even a more detailed question about that, but no, it was the automated part. So with the automated, like, I'm just looking at a property management portal. It doesn't really, it's never a transaction to say that they are late. It only shows transactions when they pay. So I'm guessing you could only really automate the payment part, right? So if you said, hey, they're $3,000 behind, and then they make a payment on the first, that part would be automated. Like you wouldn't really be able to automate the non-payment, is where my mind's going, right?
Yes. So we don't handle payments through the platform.
Okay.
So you can use it regardless of how you're getting paid.
Mhm.
Cash, Zelle, e-transfer, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. We don't deal with that.
Okay.
So when we do integrate with a property management system, essentially what you'd look for is the balance. So they tend to have a rental ledger, and that's the
Right.
information that we pull in. And that's going to be the same thing that you would see within our platform.
Okay. All right. That makes a
Yeah.
lot more sense, right? It's not looking at the specific parts. Like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, does this make sense for all properties? Is it like, hey, if the rent's too low, this doesn't make sense, or if the rent's too high, or does this make sense to do on any type of property?
It does, for sure. I mean, we see, I mentioned that a lot of our users are smaller independents.
Yep.
So, whether it's single family or they own a multifamily, whatever that is, the main reason why we see that is that they tend to not to have a whole other levers to pull on, right? So there's a reason every other industry reports data to the credit bureaus. It's because it's effective. And, we've been able to build a platform that allows you to do that regardless of how large you are. And as there's a reason that a lot of those smaller independents utilize us because they feel like, okay, now you have some leverage on your team that you can provide this great reward. I mean, if you own rental property, you understand the value of credit.
Yeah.
And so that's a real positive incentive, whether the individual is looking to buy your home or not. But on the flip side is it helps make sure that, when your mortgage comes due, you've got your rent paid. So that way you can make sure that you're going through and getting those mortgage payments done.
Okay. And not to get too specific on this question about the price, because this is an evergreen podcast, so some people might watch this 5 years down the road. So, but is the price based on like a percentage of the rent, or is it based
Hmm.
on a monthly subscription? And if you have like 10 properties, is it based on like having a account or having 10 properties, or how? Anyway, just kind of like
Yeah.
not actually what is the price, but how is the price calculated?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're reporting a current tenant, we do have something called a premium membership. Is right now it's $239 per year, and it allows you to report up to 20 current leases every single month. So even if there's 5 people on a lease, you can report all those tenants. The added benefit with that is you also get automated messaging. So rent reminders, late payment notices that go out to the individuals. You can choose to use those or not. And it basically just helps bring a positive and proactive conversation between you and your individuals. If you are looking to report a former tenant, that's a one-time fee of $99 for our premium members. And what that does is allows you to report the debt of that individual until they paid, or for up to 7 years in the US and 6 years in Canada. And that's really just the statutes of limitations for what the credit bureaus accept. But anyways, when you're looking to report a former tenant, you don't need a premium membership. It's just a one-time fee to report that debt until the U market is paid.
Okay. And then when
Yeah.
people are marketing this, like, or do they market this? Is it would they put this usually like, right in the ad, like, hey, this could be a great way to build your credit, when they're listing this, or do most people just sort of do the reporting and keep it on the down low?
Yeah, it's
I guess
ideally we see
personal
across,
personal
right?
preference.
So yeah, I mean, people come to us. We see a lot of members that come to us because someone doesn't pay or their tenant asks them to report their rental information. So we end up having a lot of people that meet us for the first time in the middle of a tenancy, which is fine. We can
Yeah.
accommodate that. What we always encourage is that you start promoting it in your lease agreements, then, or sorry, in your advertisements for the rental properties. You use our clauses in your applications as well as your leases, and then you start offering the reporting for that individual right away. I mean, that's where we start to see the best sort of traction. One, it allows you to be proactive with those conversations with the individual. They know that they have this benefit. It helps attract great tenants, especially in tight markets. It's kind of just an added bonus that you can offer on your properties, where it's a fairly inexpensive way that you can give some added assurance to yourself that the rent will get paid on time. So, I mean, we haven't really touched on this, but we do offer tenant screening through the platform, so you can do
Oh,
credit checks and background checks and things like that as well. But our main differentiator in the market is that ability to report that rental data to the credit bureaus.
well, in all honesty, if you want to have better tenants and you don't want to actually have to deal with reporting late rent or missing rent, or they've gotten behind, it's going to come down to the tenant screening.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
What kind of things does it pull up on the tenant screening? Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, we'll give the full long form credit report. So score, trade lines, etc., collections, inquiries. And then if you're doing background checks, it'll have basic things like former employment, basically searches for criminal databases, like 110,000 public databases. So it's not going to give you kind of the very specific criminal looking in what's within the court system, but it will give you any publicly available information around fraud, criminal activity, those sorts of things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I didn't even realize, I forgot, actually, I think you did mention on the other podcast, but I completely forgot that it did background checks. What else does it do? Anything else I should have asked you for questions about this? Because it's something that I honestly planned on using when we did the podcast before, and then it completely slipped my mind. And honestly, after this call, I think I should figure something out and get this set up for at least, all the properties that have a rent to own kind of agreement or seller financing on, I think for sure should have this set up.
Yeah.
But anyway, what other things should I have asked you, or would people like to know about this product?
Yeah. Well, it's one thing I didn't actually touch on. So when you're looking to report debts, we often get the question about judgments and going through, the LTB in Ontario or local tribunals. So it's important to know that you can report while you're going through those tribunals. So you can report unpaid rent and utilities until you obtain a judgment. And then when you do obtain a judgment, you'd simply update the balance, which can include things like damages, legal fees, or if they break their lease and they determine, okay, they owe you 2 months rent, whatever. So just to keep yourself safe, make sure you're only reporting rent and utilities as outlined in the lease until you get the judgment. The other thing that I'll say is that when you're looking at a product like ours, it's new. So a lot of people have never heard about it. They don't understand that you could report it. They don't understand when consent is or is not required. And so that's what we're here for. Like, we created this industry within Canada. We were one of the first to actually offer it within the US. So our team is here to support, and the system is built in a way to help make sure that you're compliant. You can't report in an individual that you're not supposed to unless you're, knowingly entering inaccurate information. Right. And so the biggest thing I'd say is, like, create an account, reach out to our support team. We got a bunch of how-to videos. We got a bunch of stuff so we can start to do it, and just start, like, enter that. If you have a tenant that owes a debt, like, enter it, like, start with that. If you've got someone that's doing a rent to own, or someone that's new to country, student housing, we see a lot of that on the platform now, where, someone like myself that's moved back and forth, like, I've used it to help build back my credit in the US when I moved away for a couple of years and then come back. It is significant in the impact that it can have on an individual's life. So, it's just a matter of just get using the platform, play around with it, ask our team what it is, and just know that the information that you enter can have a real impact on people's lives.
I love it. That was great.
Yeah.
I might have to edit this out because I'm just thinking in my head, is there a way to even report on your own credit if you were trying to, say, build your credit? Maybe if something you could maybe be, I don't know, doing something from your company or some sort of loan. Is there a possibility to that? I might have to, like I said, I might have to delete this question. I don't know if this even makes any sense.
No, we've got it a couple of times before. You can't. So the credit bureaus don't allow you as the creditor to report on yourself. So yeah, unfortunately that's not an option, but
Hey,
yeah.
You never know. Never heard.
Yeah.
I have
of
a
course
lot
not.
of people that are always, like, trying to build their U.S. credit as fast as they can, for, lending purposes and other things. I'm like, maybe there's a way to do that, right?
Yeah.
But I guess, this is another question. Could you do this on, like, a private loan? I'm guessing you could, like a promissory note or something like that.
Theoretically, but not through our platform.
Okay.
So Yeah, the agreement that we have with the credit bureaus is specifically related to rental data.
Okay.
And so, we stick to the rental data within the platform. There could be a way to do it. I just don't know of one right now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair. And
Yeah.
the people who are listening to this are landlords anyway. So, so this makes a lot of sense. Anyway.
Yeah.
Grant,
We've got that inquiry a couple times, right? It's like, hey, I want a loan to my brother, or, I'm trying to do this. And unfortunately, you just have to stick to kind of what's outlined in the guidelines. And that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Awesome. Grant, people like, hey, FrontLobby, where is it? What's the website? You said Canada, US. Is it a .com, a .ca? Where do they go? Where do they find this?
Yeah. Best place to start is our website. It's just frontlobby.com. We've got a bunch of information there. If you ever need some help, there's, of course, links there, or you can just email us anytime at support@frontlobby.com, and we're happy to get back to you, email, give you a phone call, kind of whatever you need to get going. Don't worry if you got properties in one country, both countries, we got ways to kind of get you sorted out. So as I said, don't be afraid. Just ask for some help, have a look at the website, and we're here to help support.
Awesome. Grant, like always, great to have you on the podcast. A lot of information, and I think a lot of people are gonna. This is a huge thing to have as a tool in your tool belt. It can help you. I think it'll help a lot of people. To make things right. So
yeah, we've had almost 50,000 people sign up. So it's we've helped a lot of landlords and a lot of tenants build credit. So it's hopefully you can be next.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
That was a nice video. Bye.